Last year, Toyota sold 600,000 Camrys globally. Of those, almost half were in the United States. In fact, Camry has single-handedly been the best-selling passenger car here in the States for 20 years. More recently, Toyota announced it'll kill its Camry production in Japan. Today, I'm talking about why Toyota's axing it and how this will impact us here in the United States. We'll also talk about why the Camrys were unpopular in Japan and why the Japanese are buying more crossovers, despite its low birth rate and shrinking population. And if you want a testament to Toyota reliability, stick around to hear about the man who drove his Toyota Highlander past 1 million miles. The Camry might not be luxury, and it's not the most exciting car, but it's affordable, reliable, practical, with a solid reputation for longevity. So it's no real surprise it's the most popular passenger car in America. In 2021, Toyota sold nearly 314,000 Camrys, which was a 7% jump from the year before. It's more popular than the second most popular passenger car, which is the Corolla. The Camry's advantage is its size. As a mid-sized sedan, it's larger and more comfortable than the compact Corolla. Since the Camry's launch in 1980, Toyota's produced more than 21 million Camrys worldwide. And in the US alone, 13 million of those models have been sold here since the model arrived to America in 1982. Especially after a complete redesign in 1992, the Camry skyrocketed to the top of the market where it remains today. Despite the popularity of the Camry around the world, funny enough, the one country that hasn't latched onto the Camry is, believe it or not, Japan. And that's ironic because that's where the Camry was born. Last year, Toyota only sold 6,000 Camrys in Japan. Needless to say, this is why Toyota recently announced it'll end production of the Camry domestically in Japan at the end of this year. Apparently, domestic sales in Japan will phase out in stages. Toyota has already stopped taking most new orders for Camrys in Japan. But here's what's baffling about all this. Apparently, the Camry isn't popular in Japan because SUVs and crossovers have taken over in Japan too. At first, that might not sound too surprising when you consider the fact that here in the States, we also face a similar trend where SUVs and crossovers are now more popular than sedans. But in America, that makes sense because we have wide roads and highways. Plus, the typical American family has an average of 1.9 children under the age of 18. But Japan is a whole different story. We're talking about a small country where streets are small and narrow. And consider Tokyo. Tokyo alone has 39 million residents. I mean, about a third of the entire country live there. It's even more congested than New York City. And in fact, it's the most populated metropolitan area in the entire world. You'd think in tight quarters that compact cars and sedans would reign supreme, not crossovers or SUVs. But it's not just that. Believe it or not, birth rates are dropping in Japan, meaning less kids per family. In other words, if you have less kids, if any at all, why would you want a crossover and SUV? And yet, crossover and SUV sector has become very popular in Japan. Speaking of birth rates, Japan itself acknowledges its own population crisis. Last year, the number of registered births in Japan dropped to a record low. Actually, the birth rate in Japan has been declining for decades. But the concerning thing is that it's only getting worse. Back in 1982, Japan registered over 1.5 million births. Fast forward 40 years later to 2022, Japan had less than 800,000 registered births. In fact, first time ever that Japan saw less than 800,000 births since 1899. To put that in perspective, here in the US, we had over 3.6 million registered births. They say a country needs a 2.1 fertility rate to maintain a stable population. That's not taking into account immigration, of course. Compare that benchmark to Japan's fertility rate of just 1.3. If you think that's bad for Japan, it gets worse. Last year in 2022, Japan also reported a record high for post-war deaths. I'm talking over 1.58 million. For more than a decade now, deaths have outpaced births in Japan. As the elderly Japanese population is overflowing, the younger workforce is shrinking. And that means less workers to fund pensions or work in the healthcare section to take care of the old people. Now that all said, another irony is that Japan also has one of the highest life expectancies in the world. The average Japanese lives 85 years, whereas the average American lives 77 years. In fact, back in 2020, almost 1 out of every 1,500 people in Japan was 100 years old or older. Japan is the third largest economy in the world, yet it ranks as one of the world's most expensive places to raise a child. Analysts blame Japan's declining birth rate to the country's notoriously high cost of living, slow increases in wages, limited space, lack of childcare support, lack of public tolerance for small children, and don't forget, Japan ranks among the worst globally in gender equality. I can't think of another country that has all these specific attributes, so I can see why, put together, Japan is a boiling hot pot of trouble. All this to say, officials in Japan are worried. We're talking about the preservation of a country with its culture, economy, and rich history. Where would the world be today if the Japanese weren't there to usher in the digital revolution, video games, manga comics, and anime? Don't forget karaoke, vending machines, sushi, and ramen. And thanks to Japan, we have some of the most reliable cars on American roads today. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said that Japan is on the brink of not being able to maintain social functions. That's why, to sustain Japan's economy and society, child rearing support is now Japan's most important policy. In fact, the Japanese government intends on doubling government spending on child-related programs. But critics say money alone won't be enough to fix the ever-growing problem. The thing is, it's not like the government hasn't tried to launch initiatives to fix the problem before. It has. The Japanese government in the past added new policies to enhance child care services and improve housing facilities for families and children. And some rural towns have even started paying couples to have children. But none of these previous efforts have curbed the problem or reversed the downward trend. Let's talk about humanity. Generally, human beings share a natural desire for love, companionship, and family. But actually, young Japanese are increasingly rejecting marriage. The Japanese government did a survey last year. They found that 25% of Japanese in their 30s have no intention of tying the knot. Common reason is increasing financial pressures and a desire to live without social obligations. Of course, there are those who do desire to marry, but even then, these folks say they want less than 2 children. Right now, the population of Japan is over 125 million people. If the downward trend doesn't reverse, then it's estimated the population will fall below 87 million by 2060. For a major world economy, that's pretty much on the brink of extinction. A shrinking population is a concern for the Japanese government also because it provides a risk to national security. Imagine if another country were to threaten Japan with military action. Well, then with a limited headcount, you have less people to support the military. Anyway, there's a cabinet minister of children's policies. His name is Masanobu Ogura. He warns that in the next few years pretty much is Japan's last chance to reverse its decreasing birth rate. The birth rate keeps falling at the same rate it's been falling since the beginning of 2000. The young population will shrink at twice the current pace in the 2030s. Several weeks ago, Ogura unveiled a draft proposal to increase subsidies for child rearing and a salary increase for younger workers as an incentive to marry and have kids. It also includes more generous student loans for higher education and greater access to child care services. Anyway, the proposal will reportedly be part of a bigger policy package that the government will complete in June. But I digress. All this to say, Toyota's killing the Camry in Japan. If you're wondering what it means to the US, well, no need to worry for now. The Camry remains popular with strong sales in other parts of the world, especially here in America. Toyota says the new Camry models will continue to be sold in and developed foreign markets, including the US. The current Camry generation was released in North America back in 2017. Rumors have already been swirling about a redesign for the 2024 model year. We'll just have to wait and see as more information becomes available. I'll be posting an upcoming video about the 2024 Camry as well as the 2024 RAV4 very soon, so keep your eyes out. By the way, speaking of Toyota, some of you may have heard about the man who drove his 2006 Toyota Highlander hybrid over 1 million miles. I'm talking about Mark Miller, a man from Florida. And that Highlander was actually his first Toyota he ever bought. It was also his first vehicle that he bought brand new. By the way, as a side note, this vehicle he bought was the first model year of the Highlander to come out as a hybrid option. It was also the first hybrid in the world to come as a 7-seater, and Toyota showed the world that hybrids don't need to come small. Now I know what you're thinking. On a world that his 2006 Highlander drive past the 1,000,000-mile mark. The thing is, it's his job. He did road paving work across the state of Florida. According to Miller, he's probably done some 8,000 trips across Alligator Alley in his Highlander. But look, the fact that his Toyota survived 1,000,000 miles is a huge testament to the reliability of the brand. Mind you, Miller had a partner too. In fact, when asked how he kept his car running as long as he did, he answered, "Never forget to change your oil." So there you go. Sadly, Miller lost his 06 Highlander hybrid last September 2022, but not because of inherent mechanical problems, but due to Hurricane Ian. But fortunately for Miller, Toyota surprised him with a brand new Highlander for free. Here's how it went. Back in January, Richard Germain and Wendell Harvey, the owner and general manager of Germain Toyota of Naples, Florida, invited Miller back to the dealership. This was the dealership that initially sold him his 2006 Highlander. It's also where he's been getting the car serviced all these years. Anyway, when he got there, they surprised him with a 2023 Highlander Hybrid Bronze Edition in cement gray, pretty much as a thank you gift for his loyalty. Miller said that picking up his initial 2006 Highlander Hybrid was magic, but getting that new Highlander was super magic. But now you tell me, what do you think about Toyota's decision to kill the Camry production in Japan? How long do you think the Camry will stay in the US? Please share by commenting below. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for your support.